I never saw it coming. After 22 years of marriage, I thought I knew my wife, Melissa, but the night she asked for a divorce, my entire world crumbled. In the early years of our marriage, life felt predictable but comforting. We met through mutual friends and shared a desire for a simple life, meals together, relaxed weekends, and a future built on love and stability. We faced challenges, but nothing ever seemed too difficult. Our kids brought purpose to our daily routines, and I believed our shared history would carry us through any tough times. But as time passed, cracks began to appear. We grew too comfortable. Conversations shifted from dreams to logistics, and our time together became routine. I ignored the subtle signs, Melissa's distant looks, her changed tone, thinking it was normal. After 2 decades, I believed our bond was strong enough to handle any changes. But I was about to learn that even deep love can fade if neglected. One evening, I greeted Melissa in the kitchen, but she didn't respond. Over the years, I'd grown accustomed to her quiet moments, so I wasn't alarmed. Later, she joined me in the bedroom and asked how my day was. I proudly told her about my promotion, a milestone I thought we'd celebrate, but her lack of enthusiasm worried me. Then she dropped a bombshell. "Mark, I want a divorce." I was stunned and confused. I couldn't understand where this was and coming from. When I asked why, she hesitated before confessing, "I met someone else. We need to be together." Her words hit me hard. As a skilled salesman, I was used to handling surprises, but this was different. This was personal. "You met someone? What, you want a fling?" I blurted out, still reeling. "It's not like that," she explained hesitantly. "It just happened." My mind fixated on those words. I stayed silent, still in shock, like I was suspended in midair, waiting to crash down. "Mark, I love him. I'm sorry. I never meant for this to happen," she said before leaving the room. Overwhelmed with emotions, I tried to make sense of it all, but there was no logic, no explanation for why our marriage was suddenly over. I should have been angry, but I was stuck on understanding how this happened. I searched the house, hoping to find her, maybe for one last conversation, but she was gone. Her phone, credit cards, checkbook, and a sealed envelope were left behind. It felt like her entire life had been reduced to nothing. The next morning, I dragged myself to work, numb and hollow. The week passed in a blur of emotions, and by the weekend, I couldn't bear the silence of our empty house. I got in the car and drove, not caring where I ended up. I found myself at a secluded lake we used to visit often, a place that once brought us peace. But now, I hated it. I didn't want peace. I wanted rage. And when it finally caught up with me, I fell to my knees, pounding the ground, screaming and cursing everything, including Melissa. As night fell, I was left with the deep pain of betrayal and rejection. Alone with my grief, I cried harder than I ever had before. Days later, I finally opened the envelope she left behind. Inside was a letter in her familiar handwriting. With trembling hands, I read it. "Dear Mark, I'm not sure when you'll find this letter, but by now you know I've left you for someone else. This wasn't something I planned, and I'm sorry for the pain I've caused you. You've been a wonderful husband and father, and I know this hurts. I met this person by accident, and our connection grew beyond friendship. This isn't a reflection on you. You've been everything a woman could want. But I couldn't fight my feelings anymore, and neither could they. We haven't had an affair and won't until we're both divorced. We didn't want to add more pain by complicating things further. I left everything behind because I'm starting a new life. Dragging out the divorce wouldn't help anyone. I'm not asking for anything. You've worked hard for what you have. I hope by the time you read this, I've already spoken to our children. They didn't know anything, so please don't blame them. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it, but I hope our kids can forgive me. I still love you, Mark, and always will, Melissa." As I finished reading, my eyes filled with tears. The pain I thought I'd calmed came rushing back, sharper than before. I was too tired, too heartbroken to feel anything but deep emptiness. Over the next few weeks, I tried to move forward, repainting the house, replacing furniture, but the memories lingered. Even as I prepared for the divorce, I couldn't help but wonder why she left so suddenly and how I'd missed the signs. But one thing was clear. The life I'd built with Melissa was over, and the only thing left to do was pick up the pieces and start again. After his wife Melissa left him, Mark struggled to adjust. His conversations with their daughters were difficult, filled with questions he couldn't answer and an unspoken blame he felt from them. Thankfully, both daughters lived out of state, sparing him constant scrutiny. At work, his boss's main concern was his ability to keep bringing in clients, though Mark sensed his co-workers' curiosity and rumors. Despite a few attempts to socialize, Mark kept his personal life private. To cope, Mark focused on self-improvement. He started exercising more, learning to cook healthy meals, and keeping busy with house repairs. His routine became predictable, offering stability. Weekends were harder, so he tackled home projects which provided good therapy. Determined to find out who Melissa had left him for, he began investigating her mysterious departure. By the 4th month, Mark realized he despised his job but stayed for the income. He started day trading and, after early losses, began making small profits. Seeking balance, he took up karate and rekindled his interest in firearms, obtaining a concealed carry permit after noticing strange things at home. Items moved, keys, out of order, which led him to install a security system. As his search for Melissa's lover continued, a break came when a cafe server recognized her with an older man described as having salt and pepper hair and glasses. A co-worker later identified the man as Conrad Miller, a billionaire investor. Learning this left Mark baffled. Why would a man of such wealth and status pursue his wife? Quitting his job 6 months after Melissa left, Mark focused on day trading and his investigation. Though his daughters were supportive, they felt betrayed by their mother's abandonment. When they finally heard from Melissa, their conversations ended in anger and heartbreak. Mark's search led him to Conrad's estate in Tuxedo, New York, but his inquiries attracted dangerous attention. One night, after grocery shopping, 2 men confronted him, warning him to stop pursuing Conrad Miller. Using his self-defense training, Mark turned the tables and managed to defuse the situation without violence, but the encounter only strengthened his resolve. Despite the danger, Mark refused to back down, determined to uncover the truth. Even with my martial arts training, I shouldn't have been able to overpower one of them. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that these men worked for Conrad Miller. That realization led me to 2 big questions. Why did Conrad want to keep me away from Melissa? And why had Melissa left without discussing it with me? Thinking back, I realized I didn't know much about Melissa's life before we met. She'd been a bookkeeper and lost her parents in a tragic house fire before we started dating. Most of her mementos were destroyed in that fire, and she'd always been secretive about certain things, like her cell phone, which she insisted on keeping separate from our family plan. I never saw the bills, and the statements went directly to her. This bothered me more after she left, especially once I learned about Conrad Miller and that our divorce hadn't gone through. Desperate for answers, I managed to obtain copies of her cell phone records. I discovered that she'd been calling a number in Nashville once a month for 8 months before she left. The calls increased in frequency just before her departure. 5 calls on the day she disappeared. When I tried calling the number, it had been disconnected. Frustrated and running out of leads, I knew I had only one option left: the estate in Tuxedo, New York. The estate was massive, with high walls and guarded gates. Using a camera's telephoto lens, I spotted one of the men I'd fought in the parking lot. I was in the right place. When two moving trucks arrived and then left without unloading, I worried they were preparing to leave. Desperate to see inside, I found a tree with branches extending over the wall. Using a collapsible ladder and rope, I climbed the tree and finally got a clear view of the backyard. What I saw stunned me. Diane Lindgren lounging by the pool, and then Conrad Miller stepping out and kissing her. But before I could process it, armed men stormed the patio and forced them inside. I called emergency services, reporting a shooting to get the police there faster. Then I descended the tree and sprinted toward the house, slipping inside through the open sliding glass door. I crept toward the voices and saw 7 people, Melissa among them. My heart sank. Gino, a short, heavy-set man, was threatening my wife. The situation spiraled as secrets unraveled. Conrad and Diane had turned against a powerful criminal organization, stealing millions and going into hiding. Melissa had been caught in the crossfire. As Gino prepared to eliminate them, I knew I had to act. I fired my weapon, taking down Gino and his men, but not without taking hits myself. The last thing I remembered was the sound of police sirens and Melissa running toward me before everything went dark. I woke up in a hospital, handcuffed to the bed. Melissa was there, tears in her eyes, explaining everything, how she'd left to protect me and our daughters from Gino's vengeance. Despite the pain and the months of confusion, my love for her hadn't faded. Our daughters, Katie and Carla, flew in to be by my side. Their anger toward their mother melted into understanding when they learned the truth. The weeks after the shootout were a blur of recovery and revelations. The criminal organization was dismantled, and Conrad and Diane turned state's evidence, exposing the network they'd once worked for. They forfeited their wealth and disappeared overseas. Melissa and I began rebuilding our life together. Counseling helped us heal from the trauma, and we found new joy in everyday moments, working out together, taking spontaneous vacations, and strengthening our bond. Our love, tested by fear and separation, emerged more resilient than ever as Carla's wedding approached. Our family stood united, ready to embrace the future. Whatever lay ahead, we knew we'd face it together.